No one in the studio expected the night to end with the most respected actor of his generation hurling a microphone across a soundstage and disappearing into the velvet shadows of backstage. But that's exactly what happened when renowned actor and outspoken cultural critic Adrian Vale appeared on the wildly popular late-night program, The Echo Room, hosted by the famously sharp-tongued and unshakably composed Miles Trent, whose blend of comedy, political sarcasm, and cool intellect had long made him both adored and feared in equal measure. The episode began as most do. Cheers from a primed audience, jazz outro fading, and Miles, dressed in a slate gray blazer and steel blue tie, flashing his signature wry smile as he welcomed the voice of cinema's conscience, a label that Adrian neither appreciated nor believed, stepping onto the stage with a rigid nod, a far cry from the charismatic, earthy presence fans were used to seeing on red carpets and global panels. And while the crowd offered a generous standing ovation, Adrian barely acknowledged it, shaking Miles's hand with a grip that lingered half a beat too long, the first of many unspoken messages exchanged between two men who had until now never met in person, but whose ideas had collided for years through essays, interviews, and passing jabs in podcasts and print. As they settled in, Miles opened with a compliment disguised as a question. "So, Adrian, is your latest film your most important work, or just the one you've promoted the hardest?" Eliciting chuckles from the crowd, but Adrian didn't smile. He stared straight ahead, replying, "If I wanted a clown's critique, I'd go to a circus, not a talk show," instantly quieting the audience and widening Miles's eyes by a barely perceptible notch. And though he masked it with a half laugh and a sip of water, the tension surged like static between them, electrifying everything that followed. What began as a light interview spiraled quickly into a clash of philosophies, with Miles questioning the moral high ground celebrities claim when discussing politics, suggesting that platform isn't the same as expertise, and Adrian countering that satire was too often a safe bunker for intellectual cowards to snipe at the suffering without offering shelter. And suddenly, the air in the studio changed, laughter evaporated, and viewers at home leaned in as the performance gave way to something rawer, less rehearsed, more dangerous. They debated climate justice, systemic hypocrisy, the performance of empathy, the economy of grief. And with every answer, Adrian's frustration grew more visible. His jaw tight, his hands clenched, his voice rising with each syllable, while Miles, ever the tactician, maintained an icy calm, cutting in only to twist Adrian's statements into sound bites he could deflate with a smirk or rhetorical jab. And when Adrian brought up the deaths of 3 aid workers in a war zone that inspired his new film, Miles interrupted with, "Did you know them personally, or did their story just test well with your demographic?" And that was the moment everything changed. Adrian stood up, removed his mic with 2 sharp tugs, and let it fall to the floor with a loud crack. But before walking off, he turned to the camera and said, "This isn't conversation, it's content." Then glared at Miles and added, "And you're not a host. You're a hall monitor for the indifferent." And with that, he left, trailing tension in his wake, and the crowd sat in stunned silence until Miles, smoothing his cuffs, muttered, "That was educational," then gestured for commercial. What followed in the hours and days ahead was a digital wildfire. Clips of the Walkout amassed millions of views. Commentators rushed to take sides. Hashtags like #Vale Walkout, Echo Meltdown, and Speak or Perform dominated feeds. And everyone, from academics to comedians, weighed in on whether Adrian's fury was righteous authenticity or unprofessional petulance, while Miles, doubling down, aired a follow-up monologue the next night, titled The Art of Overreaction, a 7-minute takedown of performative activism that earned both applause and outrage, depending on which corner of the internet you inhabited. Meanwhile, Adrian disappeared. No statements, no interviews, no social media, retreating to an unnamed mountain village in northern Spain, leaving his publicist scrambling and his studio partners livid, until 3 weeks later, when an anonymous account began releasing clips from a documentary-style video titled The Mirror Room, featuring refugees, doctors, and grassroots organizers speaking directly into the camera. No narration, no editing, just testimony, a stark counter to the gloss of traditional storytelling. And at the end of each video appeared the words, A. Platform is not a performance. Stop clapping, start listening. The campaign went viral, seen as both a rebuke of the talk show spectacle and a statement of Adrian's evolving philosophy. Miles, meanwhile, faced mounting pressure from within his network, not for the walkout itself, but for the growing perception that the Echo Room had become tone-deaf, a machine of mockery detached from nuance. And while ratings remained strong, focus groups showed a growing fatigue with Miles's smug tone, prompting internal discussions about guest diversity, content evolution, and even the role of humor in a burning world. And then, a twist. Adrian's people sent an offer to Miles's producers, a closed-door conversation, no cameras, no press, just the two of them and a single moderator, to be filmed only for archival purposes and never aired without mutual consent. Miles agreed, but the conversation never happened. Adrian backed out last minute, sending only a handwritten note. Some truths lose their shape when told under lights, and attached was a rare first edition of Baldwin's The Fire Next. Time, its pages underlined with furious ink. Miles never spoke of it publicly, but that book stayed on his desk for the rest of the season, and though the Echo Room continued, something had changed. The laughter was softer, the satire slower, the host more hesitant, and audiences noticed. Meanwhile, the Mirror Room became a movement of its own, inspiring classroom curricula, activist circles, even prompting a new genre of bear documentary. And in a strange twist of fate, both men, one host, one guest, had reshaped the conversation not through their best lines, but through a rupture, a fracture televised in real time, revealing not just ego or conflict but the heavy price of public truth in an age obsessed with narrative control. And though they never spoke again, and perhaps never will, their moment, unscripted, uncomfortable, unforgettable, remains etched in the culture as a rare broadcast where everything broke, and something real slipped through. Adrian Vale's abrupt departure from the Echo Room became more than a moment. It became a fracture in the cultural mirror, and in the weeks that followed, the shock turned to speculation, and then into something deeper, more strange. Obsession, reinterpretation, ownership, as people across every ideological divide co-opted the moment for their own narratives, turning Adrian into either a hero of conviction or a fragile narcissist, while Miles Trent, still anchoring his show with his trademark restraint, found himself increasingly shadowed by the ghost of that one live moment that had punctured his usually impenetrable armor. And though he continued with new guests, new segments, and a fiercely loyal audience, there was a palpable discomfort. His timing felt off. His sarcasm sharpened into something bitter, and each night as he sat at the desk staring into the lens, the memory of Adrian's words, "This isn't conversation. It's content," echoed in his mind like an accusation. He couldn't answer. Miles's producer, Callie Ray, a veteran of live television, began suggesting softer interviews, artists and scientists instead of pundits and politicians, hoping to recalibrate the show's tone. But Miles resisted, clinging to the persona he'd spent a decade refining. Only now it felt like a costume that no longer fit. And privately he wondered if the entire genre he helped perfect, ironic news, comedic takedown culture, had reached a limit. Not because it wasn't funny, but because it no longer felt brave. Meanwhile, Adrian, from his exile in Spain, remained out of sight but not out of impact. The Mirror Room grew into a network, not just a media project, but an evolving infrastructure of platform sharing. They trained displaced filmmakers to shoot and distribute their own stories, not filtered through Western narratives but raw and local. And while mainstream media initially ignored the project, when an edited short from the Mirror Room aired uncredited on a major network's crisis special, and Vale's legal team issued a furious takedown, it forced journalists to take the project seriously, not just as art but as resistance. Through all this, Adrian refused interviews, even as publishers offered book deals, film studios begged for dramatic rights, and activists asked for speaking appearances. His silence became strategic, even sacred, and when he finally did break, it wasn't on camera, but in a 9,000-word essay published in an underground literature journal no one had heard of, titled The Cage and the Curtain. in which he dissected the machinery of narrative, how media trains us to consume emotion without digesting truth, how satire often sterilizes suffering, how the televised performance of disagreement replaces real ideological reckoning. And he ended the essay not with a call to action but a question. If the story must always entertain, can it ever change us? The piece went viral, reposted by professors, pirated by YouTubers, even read aloud in performance art circles, and Miles Trent read it too in a quiet,